father complained of a stomachache. He went to the clinic. They told him it was gastric, so he was prescribed a few painkillers, told to go back home and rest it off, sleep it away. 2 days later, he was admitted into repass at 3 a.m. into the operating theater. His appendix had burst, and the innards of his body had contaminated the rest of his intestines. The surgeon later on told us that his was the worst case of appendicitis she had ever seen in her career. It was so bad that he spent 1 week in intensive care, an insipid shell of himself, unable to eat, unable to speak, unable to breathe without assistance, unable to do whatever he did before. My mother and I spent a whole week just taking care of him because he couldn't do anything by himself. You know, the funny thing is, appendicitis is a relatively simple procedure. You go in the morning, you get a cut, you can go back in the afternoon. Simple as that. But because he didn't get the medical attention he needed right from the get-go, because he let it burst, he had to be admitted for further care in the hospital. Appendicitis, when you let it burst, you have a 1 in 6 chance of dying. My father was lucky, but he wasn't lucky enough to be diagnosed right the first time around. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow Toastmasters, misdiagnosis happens more frequently than you think. According to the Baylor Medical Center in Dallas, 40% of autopsies done on the cadavers at that hospital showed that their diagnosis was wrong. To put it into perspective, the last 10 times you went to see your doctors, that last 10 times, 4 of those times, it was the wrong diagnosis. To put it into another different perspective, of the 10 people in this room, the last time you went to see doctors, 4 of you guys had the wrong symptoms diagnosed. That is pretty scary. There are 2 types of misdiagnosis, and I'll support them with a few true stories that happened to me and my family. A misdiagnosis or a misdiagnosis. Misdiagnosis being MISDIAGNOSIS, or misdiagnosis, MISSED, space diagnosis. So misdiagnosis. So a misdiagnosis is when you go in there, you get yourself diagnosed, but diagnosed with the wrong illness. So for example, 3 years ago, a few of you know I was diagnosed with lupus, but it wasn't always like that. When I went in, I was actually mistakenly diagnosed with arthritis for 3 months. So for 3 months, I was in the wrong medication, and I had the wrong care, and it wasn't until 3 months later when I went to the general hospital of the county that I was diagnosed with lupus. But in that 3 months, I had already missed a lot of classes. I had already pulled out of my course, and I had already stopped university because I mistakenly believed that my illness was never going to get better and that I was incurable. So that is what can happen if you had been diagnosed wrongly. Now, a missed diagnosis with a space. I have another story. This pertains to my aunt. 20 years ago, my aunt was diagnosed with a tumor in her brain. The doctor told her that, a misdiagnosis is when someone tells you that there's nothing wrong with you, that you don't need any care. So what happened with my aunt is that they told her that the tumor was fine, it's benign. Unfortunately, it wasn't. Over the course of 20 years, it ate away at her brain, and she recently got it removed last year, but it was already too late. The tumor had taken root in her eye and her brain, and because of that, she had to remove her eye and parts of her brain. She had irreversible brain damage, and she's not exactly coherent most of the time nowadays. So this is what can happen with a misdiagnosis. And the scary thing is that misdiagnosis can happen to anyone. It certainly happened to me, my dad, my aunt. It doesn't discriminate. And remember that 40% I told you, that 40% statistics from the Baylor University? Well, their director of pathology, Dr. Elizabeth Burton, she said that of that 40%, 10 to 11% of those people who were diagnosed wrong, if they were diagnosed right from the get-go, they would have walked out of the hospital alive. That's terrifying. And this imposes the need for us to be careful about the way we are diagnosed, to seek that second opinion. We place a lot of trust in doctors. So much trust. And it's right, they did go to medical school and come out and they are the experts. But we have to remember that doctors aren't infallible. They don't know everything, they're impotent. There are 10,000 diseases in the world and they all correspond to 200 to 300 symptoms. Your doctor, it's very easy for them to make a mistake, and with the margin of error so big and with the error that they're allowed to make so small, it's very easy to make a mistake. That's why you need to seek a second opinion. Because if it's 40% mistake the first time around, it could be 40% the second time around. If you times them together, it's 0.16, it's 16%. And the more times you seek another opinion, the more exponentially it will increase that they won't make a mistake. In Brunei, according to a 2014 survey, JKR survey, there are 37 hospitals in the Bandar area alone. So that's 37 second opinions you could be getting. 37 places for you to seek a doctor. And with medical healthcare in Brunei being only $1, it is no sweat off your back to just go in there, get another doctor to prescribe you, to look at you differently. You can trust your GP from the get-go, but as someone who is not a specialist in the area that you are concerned with, there could be a higher risk of you to get a wrong diagnosis. And that's why it's so important for you to get a second diagnosis. So with that, I hope I've covered my 3 points for today. 1, the fact that it is so easy to be misdiagnosed. Number 2, the fact that there are so many hospitals in Brunei, it's just so easy to go there. And number 3, that doctors don't know everything, and it's our responsibility to make sure that we reduce the margin of error as much as possible. So the next time you have a stomach ache and the doctor prescribes you medicine that's just not working, or the next time you have a migraine and then the painkillers aren't doing anything for you, or the next time you have a flu and that the antibiotics isn't making it go away, I want you to sit down, take a deep breath, and think about asking for a second opinion. Thank you very much.